to be fascinated by something is to still feel like you want to know more about it. You know, I think if there's one quality that, if there's a characteristic that if I just embraced more of, it would just continue to make my relationships better. It would make my businesses better. It would make my health better. It would be curiosity.
Hello and welcome. This is Brian Delaney with Unlock Potential, where we get together with top experts in their field who have simple, profound advice to help you and I live better lives, to be able to be more fit to serve the people around us and answer that question, the question that nags within all of us: how good can I be and how great can I make it for people around me? Welcome back again to the next episode of Unlock Potential. Today, I am joined by a wine connoisseur, a life expert, a journeyer of the success path, and just somebody who I found has been a great friend to me, a great business partner to me, and somebody who just knows a lot about life and relationships. So I'm excited for you to get to live and learn for this next hour with us from Mr. Ayres Newsom. Hey, Ayres, how's it going?
Great. How are you, Brian?
So glad to have you here.
Man, I'm glad to be here.
Especially post Mexico last week, right?
I know, man. Well, we could have gotten these guys down to Mexico.
I know. There's a different price point there, I think.
There is, yeah.
But yeah, just coming off that trip, a lot more life that we've gotten to live together. Another year around the sun for you. Some awesome Italian food, whale watching. We were the premier whale saving team in Puerto Vallarta for
Rescatores.
Yeah, Rescatores. But yeah, to get to it, I mean, I really think that other people getting to know you and getting to understand some of the principles that you found, the mindsets that you found, and just the life experience that you've had is going to be enriching for them, just as it has been for me. And to tell a quick story about Ayres when it comes to, and his eyes are already dropping, but sometimes you don't know if you've got a great partner in business. But initially, we met through both of us. We both at the time were in sales with two different organizations, and I was at a Taekwondo studio with my family, and we were all studying there. And you started at that same studio in order to pick up some sales business and find clients and do all that. And the first person you meet in there is another sales guy, and namely me. And that led to some whiskey neat that we got to enjoy, which led to you coming on a sales ride along with me, which led to just this partnership that's meant so much to me. And saying it's meant so much to me just financially would diminish it to a point where it wouldn't be recognizable. But I remember sitting up where it's like, felt like it was like 2:00 in the morning, more than likely could have been at a conference that we were both at. And you were sitting there telling stories, doing impressions, and I was just there laughing my ass off. And I remember saying to you, I need you to do well at this, because otherwise I have to pay you personally to be in my life. And still feel the same way, even more so now. But yeah, talk about, for me, we always try to hit this a few big topics first. So talk about, for you, what it means to be an enthusiastic entrepreneur who adds value to his clients.
Yeah, well, enthusiasm is it's such a great source of energy. And depending on what you believe, energy is a massively vital role. There are some that will say that everything is energy. You know, find myself inclined to not argue with those who say that. You know? So I feel like having enthusiasm is a critical piece for success, just in life in general. You know, I think enthusiasm in and of itself adds a lot of flavor, and it just adds a lot of richness to life. You know, we get to choose how we're going to move through the world. We get to choose how we're going to live moment by moment and day by day. And we can live in unenthusiastic ways, or we can live in mightily enthusiastic ways. And for me, quality of life is better when I'm choosing to be mightily enthusiastic. And I think that translates directly into business as well. I think that in order for anything to grow, it needs energy. And I think the same is true for business. I think the same is true for relationship. I mean, God, I don't think either of us would be married if we entered into the relationships unenthusiastically, right?
Very, 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 very true. I think for people like myself, who in the beginning, like I saw you enter with enthusiasm and build skill. For me, I entered with some skill, but had to build enthusiasm. And when we're talking about that, what are some of those practical things that people who may lean a little bit more toward the shy side, a little bit more toward maybe an introvert side, what are some of those things that people can do to be enthusiastic?
Man, that's a tricky question, right? Mm-hmm. You know, because one way to look at that is, and a person who is feeling that way about themselves may be inclined to think that I have, I'm being asked, or I'm being required, or it is required of me now to act inauthentically or against my nature.
Great point. Yeah.
And I don't believe that that's true. I have seen a lot of people who, you would just think that they are the shyest people in the world. And I have seen them like really just like they light up. I've seen it, full of enthusiasm. And if enthusiasm, if it is energy, then recognizing that there's a source for that. And so I think it's about being curious about where that comes from. Hey, where are times in my life where I have been enthusiastic, and why was I enthusiastic, and where did that come from? And then start asking questions like, okay, how can I create that at will?
Yeah.
That's one thing that that's one approach that I would say around that.
Yeah. And it's something I notice about you, because it translates to everything. It's like when you talk about a bottle of wine, I want to drink that bottle. When for years when we were going out to dinner, I'm like, you guys order for me. I just like, I'm not even going to order what you order. I just want you to order for me instead now. And I think that's, as people who maybe are starting a business or who want to be compelling when it comes to their job, or want to learn how to be charismatic speakers, I think really understanding that enthusiasm isn't a trait or a personality. It's something that you can access, and it may look a little bit different for you in order for it to be authentic, but find it. Find what that looks like for you. And for you, what I've seen that translate into, when you talk about things, people listen, and you have a passion and a knowledge for those things that can be transmitted to other people, so they enjoy their wine just a little bit more. They buy with a little bit more peace of mind, or they eat the food and just get to really relish it, like that one bite, rather than getting to the end and saying, that was a good steak, So yeah, talk about your mindset on enjoying that in the moment, how enthusiasm relates to that.
Well, there is no richer moment in life. Mm-hmm. There just isn't. It's the one we have.
Yeah.
Like that's the richest moment that we get. Mm-hmm. It's this moment. And I have definitely spent some moments of my life thinking, not being present in the moment, not being present with people, not being even present with myself at times, right? And if there's a secret around that for me, it's just trying to really be present with that. What is the topic, and who are the people that I'm with. How can I, and it's a practice, I guess, now, and I just sink into it easily. And I think most people, I appreciate the way you're talking about it, but I'm not the only one that's like this in the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You are very much like this. We know a ton of other people who are like this as well. Like there are people that are like this. And I think for the people who that's true about, it's because they have a practice of really feeling, allowing themselves to feel it. Because it's such a wonderful thing when you get to feel it, to be totally immersed in that experience. I just feel like that's the best way to get the most out of any moment, is to be completely immersed in it in whatever way that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that word, because that almost is actually more descriptive than enthusiasm. It may look like enthusiasm on the outside, may feel like that, but for you, your experience is just immersion in it, and a curiosity and almost a fascination that you get to share with other people.
And the fascination is a big one, right?
Okay, talk about that.
Well, because the fascination, to me, it implies a curiosity around it, because to be fascinated by something is to still feel like you want to know more about it, and I think that's just a really big one. Just really, I think if there's one quality that, if there's a characteristic that if I just embraced more of, it would just continue to make my relationships better. It would make my businesses better. It would make my health better. Mm-hmm. It would be curiosity.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
I think that's so good. One of the principles that I heard from Peter Crone was, the next time you see someone, treat them as if that's the first time you're meeting them. And just having that excited curiosity that comes with that is fascination, and being able to get yourself, not wait for the moment to engage you, but to be able to engage that moment to see, because there's no way you can engage that moment and have it be any less real, right? The more engaged we are in those moments. And, if you want to see fascination and curiosity and on display, then you'll have to come out to dinner with us, or come to dinner with us on Thursday. Well, actually, no, that's our dinner. Come to dinner with us on Friday. That one's our time. But and then just see that drink of wine, that bite of food, that conversation that you're in the middle of, and it's like all the world starts to drop out around you, and only that moment that you're in, which happens to be the only place we can be present and powerful, is in that moment. But everything but that moment just starts to dissolve. Yeah. It just starts to dissolve. And when the whole world around it dissolves, that moment becomes so much more enhanced, because we're not distracted from it. And I do know a lot of people who have built that.
Yeah. And
built that inside of their relationship. And I know other people who haven't taken the time to build it. But what do you think from your past, like from where you came from, what do you think allowed you to have access to starting that practice, or what in life demanded you have that practice of curiosity and enthusiasm?
Well, I grew up moving around a lot, as a kid. I didn't grow up in the same place. I was in 3 different states from elementary school to the time I was in high school.
Okay.
And multiple schools, and so I moved around a lot. And from just a really pretty humble background and set of parents. Neither one of my parents, both of them attended college. Neither of them graduated. Dad was an electrical engineer, but he was a blue collar guy. My mom worked as a clerk. You know what I mean? So like pretty humble, and so moving around, humble, always having to like kind of be the new kid. Like part of it was a little bit of a survival skill around that, like learning how to be adaptive, how how can I get people to notice me, and how can I get people to like me? Like that was a big one, especially when you're, in your early teens going through adolescence, man.
And you're moving around and
around a lot, and so the learning how to be curious about people was a big part of that. But also, I love being outside. I love, I play. Like, I live to play.
Yeah.
I live to play. And I was really fortunate because I got to work in some industries and some environments that a lot of people don't really get to spend a lot of time in. Like I was a raft guide for 10 plus years. And there's just a lot of things that are counterintuitive about guiding rafts and being on whitewater rivers, Same thing about being a ski instructor. A lot of that stuff is counterintuitive. And so there is a need for curiosity around that so that you can learn how to do it better. Because if you don't do it right, man, it is a really bad day.
Yes.
Yes. So I think that those are probably some of the places where it came from, just moving around a lot and working in some environments that really just kind of demanded that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I love about, you and I have very different backgrounds, and we were doing very different things in our 20s than one another. But something that definitely we both love a lot of the same things. We both love to get on bikes, get put on a pair of skis, gone cat skiing with you before, gotten to go heli skiing with you before. Nothing like a little bit of time in a wood-fired sauna with a freezing river right next to you.
That was good. Surfing.
Yeah.
Fishing.
Surfing most recently, out in Costa Rica, fishing. And one of the things that I find from you is when you're around, you're a really great teacher, but you also know how to be a student. And I think being able to be both of those things at appropriate times is challenging, because when we get in that teacher mode, it's so easy for us to stay in this mode of certainty rather than being able to drop down into this student mode, this mode of curiosity. And I've found myself in that student mode with you when it comes to fly fishing, when it comes to even some things around skiing, when it comes to rafting, just being in that student mode. And one of the things that I see with you is you're able to, for as prolific of a teacher and the vast amount of knowledge that you have about a lot of different things, we joke you're the Vitruvian man, right? You're still able to jump down into that student mode and go from certainty to curiosity. Talk about the importance of that for you, not only in learning recreational, other fun things to do, but also when it comes to building a great business like you have, it being in the midst of building another business, with your financial services company through the Newsom agency and Life Golden, as well as Vino Mundial, as you're really starting to take the reins with that and grow that and decide what the future looks like for that. Talk about that, the importance of being able to go from teacher mode to student mode.
Well, first off, thank you. That is very generous, and I appreciate that. Because I struggle a lot with, at times, dropping into student mode, because I love being certain. Mm-hmm. I love being the guy that knows the most, and oftentimes it might not be the best motivator for it, but oftentimes some of what inspires me to be a student is this desire to be the most knowledgeable about, if I'm really going to be honest around that.
Yeah.
Because I like that. But what I like about being the teacher is watching people make the connection.
Yep.
Like that is
when somebody gets it.
Oh man, it's life-giving to me.
Yeah.
Totally life-giving. And I mean, in what do you do when you've given everything you got to give?
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I guess you got to go back and get some more somewhere, you know? So that's what it's, for me, that's what it's about. And I just love learning. You know, I like, I probably one of the things that I identified the most with when I was just probably around 7th grade, when we were really starting to get into social studies and we were really starting to study some history, the period in history that I just fell in love with that. I fell in love with the Renaissance period. I loved it. I love that idea of coming out of the Dark Ages. I love that idea of an enlightened period. And I love that idea of learning. And the idea of a Renaissance man, just like, I was like, that's what I want to be one day when I grow up. Yeah. And that has just been, for whatever reason, that is just one of the things that has just kind of been emblazoned on me. And I have, and it's just, I've identified that as part of who I am. And so therefore people like us do things like that. Like we're constantly learning, and I just love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that culture was so great. And it was marked by this idea of like the person who was not only the painter, but the sculptor and the historian. And that was a true Renaissance. And the engineer.
And the inventor.
Yeah, Da Vinci, with everything that he did between engineering and sculpting and painting. And then he goes and has the gall to say that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Screw that guy. Like, he knows how to do all this stuff well. And then simplicity is sure. Like,
heretic.
I'll trust your actions, not your words, buddy. A sculptor, painter.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's what I see that you've really adopted, and something that I admire not only about this idea, but about your example to other people who you're teaching, is you've adopted this idea about just having that level of curiosity, learning this to the best of my ability, and getting to be a person who can communicate what I've learned back into people and watch them grow through that. That's such a big deal, because we'll go to Mexico, and we're thankful that we had you there, because both you and Sis are you speak the language so well, you know what to expect. You can even like get down to the detail part of that. But there's also this place that you come to from that where you're not so much of a generalist that you're a jack of all trades and master of none, but you're not so much of a specialist that you find yourself constantly out of position, right? And I think that's a lot different, because we're in a culture right now that really admires and really pays specialization.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that there's not a place for that. I'm just saying that that's not the only place that's available.
Yeah. Yeah. And the world is just such a rich place. And life is just such a rich experience. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know where that belief came from, but it's strong in me. And so therefore, I just believe that we kind of I owe it to myself to be out there and experiencing as much of it as we can. And I kind of feel, I'm really lucky because, I didn't graduate high school. Mm-hmm. I didn't go to college. Mm-hmm. So therefore, there were a lot of doors that weren't going to be open to me, which forced me to find other doors. And man, a lot of them were open, and I just got to walk through a bunch of them along a period of time over the path. And man, that has made my life so rich. It has made me so valuable in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. It has given me such an immense amount of perspective and appreciation. And I feel like while there is an immense amount of value in being highly specialized, I believe that there is an incredible amount of danger in that as well. Mm-hmm. Working in restaurants, man, we had to be cross-trained.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like,
what a great way to put that. Great, being cross-trained. So as soon as one thing goes wrong, you don't fall apart.
Yeah.
Right. That process keeps running. Somebody's just having to try a little bit harder for something that's missing, but you all know how to do that. That's within capacity. Yeah. I think that's so good. And I think just doing a variety of challenging things well, when we're fly fishing, how many business things do we learn from that? It's not only back to the parable of, or the metaphor of fishers of men, but really down to the direct technique. It's like, hey, don't land the fly on the fish's head.
Yeah.
It's just something as simple as that. And you translate that and it's like, hey, don't tell somebody what's obvious, find out what they want, find out what they're looking for, and give it to them in the way that's best for them.
Yeah. And put one or two things in between them and it.
Yep.
And allow them to work through it to get to it.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it makes it more attractive and more meaningful once they get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about sales 101. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And having the privilege of ushering people through that, watching people move through that fearful mindset of, I've never done this, I can't do this, to I've never done this before, to I'm doing it, but I'm really bad at it, to I'm getting this now, I'm teaching this now, I'm watching other people go through that same process. And that's the legacy that you built in your business, is you have multiple layers of those teachers who it all started off with you and your wife teaching, starting off. And it all started off with your example in sales, which you had to learn from my example.
Man. Do you remember this? Well, and you still did it better than I did. It's like, but I think a key to learning is being a teacher, because he who teaches learns twice, like every time. And one of the gifts that you've given me in the 10 years of our business relationship is you've given me the opportunity to teach on things that I just sucked at, or to teach on things that I just wasn't doing that I needed to be doing, for my business to grow and for me to grow.
Yep.
And those were real gifts, because what it did is it made me accountable to the information, not for it, but to it. I was now accountable to it because I had taught it. Now I'm accountable to the execution of that.
Yep.
And in front of the audience, and that was just a critical piece for making it over the humps in business.
Yeah.
And at times in life as it's translated out,
Yeah. Yeah. It keeps going. And talking about that in business, I know you have the new business venture. We were able to celebrate as our flight was delayed. You were sometimes bad circumstances, good celebrations, right? But you were just saying month over month, being able to double up in revenue, and just I see your excitement. I see your passion for this next project. Talk a little bit about Vino Mundial and what has you fired up about it. What do you think you're bringing to the marketplace?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited. I think so many of the business skills that I learned, I got to learn in hospitality. I'm a firm believer that I think everybody should work in a restaurant. I think that's more important than going to college.
Yep.
I think there's a better education there. Personally.
Yeah. And misery loves company. Right. No, I'm just
but I got to work in hospitality, and I loved working in hospitality. I loved I loved what I got to help people with there. I always felt like it was a blessing, that people chose. That when I was serving at a restaurant, I was like, oh man, these people are choosing this place right now for something special, because they could be having this meal at home, but instead they're going out to eat, and there is not a soul on the planet who says, honey, I feel like saving a little bit of money tonight. Let's go spend some on dinner. It's just not how it goes, So they're going out to have a good time. They're looking to get away from it. They're looking to to get back into one another, or they're celebrating something. It's a special time going out to dinner. And it's a time, like, we do it in the moment, whether we're conscious of it or not, but we want someone else to take care of us in that moment.
Yep.
And I loved the opportunity to do that, to deliver an experience for someone, you know? So I always loved hospitality for that, because I feel like it's I feel like it's such a valuable thing. You know, we have talked over the years a lot, and you've taught me a lot about energy management, you know, and how to restore and how to recharge. Man, and that's a way that so many people do that. It's a way that we do that, and we have done it together for years, you know. So I think that it's a valuable thing. I think it adds to the quality of people's lives. I think it allows them to add more to each other and add to other relationships in their life. So I think it's a necessary thing. I don't think it's frivolous.
Yeah.
Like, I think that it's a real thing. And I'm really passionate about wine because I think that wine, I think it elevates that whole experience. Mm-hmm. I believe that all of us want to see ourselves as more than we are.
Okay.
I think that that's true for most of us. Yeah. Kind of like everyone would like to believe that, oh man, I'm good looking, I'm charming, I'm intelligent, I'm funny.
If everybody is, how can you?
How can that be, right?
How can you? Yeah.
And by the same time, I think that I won't say all, but I think a lot of people want to see themselves as being refined, as being elegant, as being sophisticated. I think many of us would like a little more prestige in our life, you know? I think many of us, I know you and I, you know, spend a fair amount of money on feeling like exclusive at some things.
Yeah, so, fair amount, all of it. Yeah. My
accountant told my wife, he says, man, you guys have a lot of Jet Set consumables. Have you looked at your P&Ls? Okay, yeah. But I think that wine delivers that in the dining experience. I think it allows people to feel a level of refinement, to feel a level of sophistication. And one of the great things about wine is depending on when you're drinking wine, and for Vino Mundial specifically, what I'm really passionate about is, you know, we only distribute wine from one region in the world, and that's Burgundy. And Burgundy, historically, I mean, it's arguably the most prestigious place on the planet where wine is made. Most expensive bottle of wine ever sold came from Burgundy. The most expensive wines that hit the market every year come out of Burgundy. And part of the reason for that is because Burgundy has one of the longest histories recorded in its winemaking. Like well over 1,000 years, where monks like recorded what they did.
Wow.
And so to be drinking that wine is literally drinking in history. So what fires me up? Man, that fires me up.
How can you not get fired up when you think about that? Yeah.
I get so fired up around that.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, we've seen the craft beer scene explode.
Yeah.
And that's a very recent thing. There's been people who've been crafting their own beers for a long time, including monks, right?
Monks, yeah.
But really the complexity of wine and where it's from and who made it and how you're drinking it with who has been explored in a lot of ways. People have been curious about that, and that's been part of that experience. And for me, even though when I met you, I was a lot more of a beer drinker than I was a wine drinker.
Whiskey.
Well, yeah, more whiskey than anything, really. So, beer appetizer.
Man.
But, you know, getting to know wine has allowed me to know what I actually want. Because I'll go, it's the same with anything. I think I learned this in about my mid-20s. I was like, well, I want that. And I would get that and I would look at it and then I would learn more about it and be like, that's the one that they wanted me to buy. That's why it was in that position on the shelf. That's the thing that you're supposed to want. That's the shiny object, but not really, but there's just a layer on that.
Sure.
And so when it came to, when it's come to different things, is starting to learn about that and then really having language around that, having a way to figure it out, like what's going on, like why are people always taking the cork and smelling it, right? Because you find yourself in a restaurant and they hand you the cork, and I'm just like, should I keep it? What do you do? And then to learn one day that it's not really even a smell thing as much as it is a feel thing.
Yeah.
To get it cork. And I'm over here like I've got little blots of red on my nose because I'm just doing what I see other sophisticated people just trying to fit in. Yeah. And I think that is definitely something that I've picked up from you, is just to understand without it being too complex. Yeah. It's like you like it or you don't. Here's why you might like this one. Here's some things that you notice, and just allowing that to be accessible. So I may not have all the right answers, like smelling the thing at the right time, or doing what but I know some of the right questions. And it all starts off with, what do I like? Yeah. What do I like? And if you got somebody who hadn't ever drank wine before, but they wanted to say, hey, I want to learn more about wine, or I want to try a few different kinds of wine. Where should I start? How would you answer that question? Where should I start?
Well, I think one of the first places is what's the setting, and who are you going to be with, and what are you going to be doing? So like, I think one of the first things to start with around that is, will there be food or not?
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Because not all wine is great with food. Mm-hmm. A lot of the New World wines that we have, wines from California and Australia, New Zealand, South America, a lot of these places, the New World wines, they're made to be enjoyed immediately right now without food. And that's kind of how they're crafted, and that's what they're meant to do.
So when you say that, just for clarity, are you thinking more like of a California cab? Like, is that what you mean when you say a New World wine?
Sure.
Yeah.
And what I really mean is, I mean a wine where, if you're going to think about wine, there's only a handful of components in wine that really make it special for what it is. You've got the fruit component that's in there. That's what gives it that juicy, fruity, the little bits, the parts that we recognize in the wine that are going to be, that we would identify as sweet. You've got the acid in the wine, which is what's going to make the mouth salivate, as you're going to get it around the sides of the tongue, all through the mouth. It's what causes us to really salivate as we drink the wine. And that's the acid that's in it. You've got the tannin that's in the wine. The tannin that is in the wine gives the wine like some structure. It gives it some body. It's the part, if you've ever eaten a whole bunch of walnuts, for example, and you go like, God, I have fur on my mouth. What is that? Or if you've had a wine that's really tannic, you feel like it just shrink wrapped your tongue or something, so then that's what makes the wine dry. And then you've got the alcohol that's in the wine, and the alcohol really does a lot to kind of help coalesce and deliver a lot of these elements. Wines, when we talk about a wine that's balanced, and for me, I think equally as important as balance is integration. Like what are the components and how well are they integrated? That's really what it's about. In a New World wine, fruit is going to be emphasized on that. Acid and tannin is going to be reduced in there, and alcohol is therefore going to show up a little bit more prevalently because we're missing a couple of these other important elements. but that makes the wine immediately accessible for people who are used to drinking sweet fruit juices and sodas all the time. That is immediately recognizable and accessible.
So true. So true. Yeah.
And we're used to drinking things without food all the time around here. So there are some wines that are just not really as good with food as others. Now we start drinking some older world wines and we think about that. Now this is wines that have been made for centuries or even millennia in places. And, like we were in Italy last year, and one of the things, we went on a wine tour while we were there, and the guy who was giving us the wine tour was a winemaker, and he just made a statement that I'd heard before, and he said, here in Italy, wine is not a drink, wine is food. And so wine is made for food around there. And it's such a fascinating thing because there, the fruit is present, the acids are really like emphasized around there. And then we've got just enough tannin to give it some structure, but we don't want alcohol to be consuming it. And we really would rather not recognize it through that. Okay. Now that's a wine that's built a little bit more for food. And if you think about it, take something like a steak. You've got that steak just like you like it. You've had the Maillard effect where it's been seared and the proteins and the sugars have just been seared right on there, and there's salt and you've got fat and protein, and you take that first bite and it just explosion in the mouth, the salt and the fat and the little bits of sugar from where it was seared, and you love it. It's a delicious bite. And then you take a second bite. Wow, that tastes really good. Not quite as good as that first bite, but you get it. Now, you have 5 or 6 bites straight back to back. And by the time you get to bite 8, man, it's just not really doing it. But you take a sip of wine that's got a lot of acid in it, and it's got some tannins, that the acids are going to cut through the fat that's through there. The tannins are going to come through and they're going to grab the proteins off your tongue. It's going to strip your palate. And then you have that next bite, just like having the first one. So there are some wines that are really good for food, and some wines that are meant not to really be had with food. So I would start with, where do you think you're going to be having this? And tell me a little bit about the environment. Will there or will there not be food? And that's going to that would start the conversation. That's where I would start that.
Yeah, that's so good, because it's this idea. And I notice that with a good wine, I eat slower, right? And it's a lot more of it. It's, don't drink wine like you're eating fast food, right? The type of thing. It's like, I think about the difference.
Especially if you're dry, yes.
It's not legal in all states. So I'll have to work on that disclaimer for the podcast now. But it is that experience of putting a bite together, right? This isn't for hunger. Like, it's not to satiate hunger first and foremost. Have that dealt with, and this is for more of that meal. And so let's say it is somebody in this situation who's trying to take their spouse out to dinner, and they're in a place where they're going out on a date, and he wants to look like, or she wants to look like somebody who at least has had an entry level unlocked potential version course of great wine.
Yeah. So, man, dude, this is great. I love this. So as a starter, like, bubbles are great.
We can talk about champagne, but I agree so much. It's like, how much fun have we had with dinners with bubbles? And it's not.
And your wife loves them.
Oh yeah, that's her favorite, and I've grown to love it. And when we had a wine tasting and we had the champagne
dinner, the whole dinner was champagne.
The whole dinner was champagne. Yeah, I was like, how is this going to work? It was awesome. Perfect for the food. Yeah. Great place to start is bubbles. And that is a great piece of information.
Yeah, it's so simple, because you can start, and champagne's great. Like, if you really want to do it, if it's special, splurge for a little bit of champagne. Some places have it by the glass. Some places have it by a half bottle. Some places you can get it in a split, which is a half of a half bottle.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great place to start. Prosecco is always going to be a little bit lighter and a little bit sweeter. Cava is going to be a little bit crisper, a little bit sharper. The champagne is going to be full, and it's going to be a little yeasty, a little bit bready. It's going to have a little bit of funk. If I were going to drink one wine for the rest of my life, it would be champagne.
Wow. That's awesome. Who knew that we were going to get to this specific of an example? This is great. This is great. I'm on this journey too. So, I really wanted to dig for that because, and what it mined out for me is something that I want to close around. And I feel like you have just valuable insight. And you just created a dichotomy. You just created a split. You said, listen, if you're drinking it, to drink it, like to whether it's not by yourself preferably, but if you do your thing.
We're not judging.
That's like that level below the Boones Farm. Where exactly is Boones Farm? I'm not sure where the farm is located, but
somewhere in Boone.
They're the kiwi strawberries that they grow there are amazing. They're just the right age. But when you're doing something from a place of necessity, that may shape what you do and how you do it, rather than from a place of celebration, from a place of enjoyment. In our time traveling to Europe and traveling to different parts of the world, we see that dinners typically start later and they last longer. We were just in Mexico. We see that the siesta is a real thing.
Yeah.
And we also see that there are results in that culture from that, like from this understanding of resting and celebration. And a lot of these things that, because we come from a lot of different places in the world, we may have lost, or in the process of assimilation, we may have lost that culture. It just didn't get passed down. Talk about your perspective on that, like the importance of doing what's necessary, but also living and celebrating well.
Man, I have not always loved what I've had to do.
Uh-huh.
And I'm grateful for that because it's taught me.
Oh yeah.
And I was reading this in my notes today, and I'm pretty sure you said it, but it's convenience is not a worthwhile aim, but it's an awesome outcome.
That's right. Comfort and convenience are not worthwhile aims, but they're awesome outcomes. Make your aim, challenge, and change.
Yeah. And so there's been times where I haven't liked what I had to do.
Yeah.
It was inconvenient and it was challenging. It was scary. But it is exactly what was necessary. And earlier I had more of that than I have now.
Yep.
Not that I never had times earlier where I could, it's not like all the choices I had were challenge and change. No, I had choices of challenge and change or stay the same.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like I had that.
Yep.
That choice was on the table.
Mm-hmm.
But if I chose challenge and change, then I got to be at this place now where, like, man, it is not that there is not challenge and change.
Mm-hmm.
Like that still exists,
Mm-hmm.
However, man, I have so many more opportunities for celebration, and the way that I get to celebrate now is what has changed the most,
Very significantly from...
Yeah, I mean, you spent the last 2 birthdays with me, man.
Yeah. Those have been pretty epic.
They've been pretty epic birthdays.
Yeah, on the Miami River, and this one down in
Mexico.
Down in Vallarta, and just and that's so true. That's so true when you like that, the elevation of how we've gotten to enjoy and celebrate these important moments and monuments in our life has upped because we've engaged in that challenge and doing those things that seem like at the time oh, am I always going to have to do this? Is it always going to take this long? Is it always going to be this tiring? Am I, I don't know if I have what it takes. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, you just, like you said, there's always been a choice. It was change or stay the same. And that's, I love that. The thing that I see in you is this understanding of a rhythm for not only like putting in the work, doing the intensity, but I've talked with a couple other guests. I'm just fascinated by the subject of patterning your life in such a way where you do have those effortful moments, days, weeks, months, years, right? You do have those, but those are followed by those rhythms of celebration. You have that intensity, but you also have this focus on longevity. It's like, I'm going to do the intense work now, but I'm not going to do that at the expense of my ability to live a long life.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that at the expense of I might lose some temporary enjoyment and some temporary living that I have to do, but I'm going to do this in a way that promotes a bigger life rather than shrinks my whole life down to this one thing. Just talk about your perspective and on that.
So speaking of longevity, one of the things that is out there right now around longevity is this idea around the need for eustress, right? Mm-hmm. And eustress, we can mistake eustress for distress at times, okay? And distress is what we experience when we are in critically stressful times where we're breaking down, like breaking down to the point where we may not be able to repair in the right time so that we can survive as an organism, right? Now that's distress. Eustress is the breaking down that's necessary so that we can build back stronger. Now that's eustress, okay? I think we were just talking the other day with Tori, with your wife, and you were saying 11 minutes of exposure to cold a week does a world of wonders for the body.
Yep.
You spend 11 minutes in 34 degree water and at a time, and you may experience distress. You may put yourself into hypothermia, but you experience 11 minutes of 40 degree water, 1, 2, 3 minutes at a time, a couple of days a week. You're getting a ton of benefit from that. Yep. And so it's about recognizing that eustress adds immense value and being able to identify what are the things that are going to build me up and make me stronger, even though they feel like momentarily and temporarily they're breaking me down. And we got to play around with it a little bit. There's going to be times where we're going to injure ourselves a little, so to speak. We may work ourselves to a state of exhaustion for a while and be like, I got to let this go for a while. Or we might work in such a way so that we stress some relationships in our life somewhere, and we have to come back around and learn how to navigate that area a little bit better, do a little bit of repair work with our spouse or with our children, but we might have to go through some of those things. Those are things that I've had to experience, and I've had to watch it happen in my business with some of my team members, but it's just necessary stuff. And it's recognizing that, like, hey, look, man, none of this stuff is going to kill us. None of this stuff is going to kill us. Yeah. We were talking 2 nights ago, I want to say it was, going when we were stomping around through the airport, like, no, man, we have got to go through the experience of screwing it up royally so that we can learn that it ain't that fragile. Yep.
That's so true. And to know that just because you feel like you're dying, it just doesn't mean the whole thing is dying. It just means a part that you don't need anymore is. Yeah. There's a emotional condition that you had. There's some sort of condition that I had that I thought was the most important thing. And so, I need my energy. So I can't, Like, I can't do this. And then, so what I do is I build a business where the central focus is not profitability, not people, not delivering value to the marketplace, but a conservation of a limited belief I have around money. And it seems like a value, but it's just a fear in a clever disguise. And unless we punch into that, we never really know how resilient it is.
Yeah.
And that's so true. I mean, we've watched people go through that. You've watched me go through that at certain times. I've gotten to watch you go through that at certain times. And that breaking down as a necessary part of that building up better, stronger, and more complete. Right? It's a great thing, and that's where you get into practice. And I think sometimes when people talk about practice, like we've all heard the Allen Iverson quote, like, practice? What are you talking about? Practice? Because he wouldn't show up for practice, right?
Yeah.
And I think when people are talking about that, a lot of times what they're talking about is doing it just long enough to find out that it's hard, and then going on to do something else only up to that same level because now they've built a cap for themselves.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to talk about those that breakthrough, or give your perspective on that breakthrough.
So we look at the developing other square, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we see that at the top, we have unconscious incompetence.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go down to the other side and we have conscious incompetence.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start to round the corner right there where the pit of despair is, round the corner where all of a sudden now we're consciously competent till we get to the point to where we are unconsciously competent. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, we just don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start to learn, oh, there's a lot that I don't know.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's when it seems like it's the hardest.
Yeah.
Right? And that corner rounding right there, and we see it on the graphic. Yeah, that's the pit of despair. That's the trap. There's gravity. It's where the gravity is strongest. It's right there.
Yep.
So we're trying to come down. But then once we learn the conscious competencies where we know what works and we know how to do it and we know that we're doing it until we get to the point to where it's just second nature.
Yep.
We're not even aware of it anymore. But it's that spot that's right there. What happens for most people is they're super excited because they don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then they start learning what they don't know. They hit the frustration stage around there, and it's either quit or push through. And so what do? A lot of them, they just they skip the conscious competency and the unconscious competency, and they just move on to something new. Boom, right back, and they start someplace else where they're fired up again because they don't know what they don't know yet.
Yeah.
And so they just start right there over, and that's just the cycle that they repeat. And whenever it gets hard, they quit and move on, and that's the file that they build for themselves around that. And I think that the most critical part about a breakthrough is recognizing that it has to have a breakdown.
Mm.
Like
100%.
like it has to.
That.
And all of us man, who doesn't look at a butterfly and say, wow, how beautiful, right? And so many of us look at butterflies and we see them as this idea of hope, and beauty and this freedom. They're so light, and they, it's just like, man, it's like, you get butterflies in your stomach. Oh, it's butterflies and it's rainbows. Like butterflies, it's the most lovely thing,
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, man. I have never had a conversation with a butterfly, but if I did, I bet that it would tell me that while it was in the cocoon, it was sure it was dying.
Oh, the imagery and what actually happens is so perfect, where inside of the cocoon that actually neither thing can exist for a brief period of time, that the butterfly can't exist because it can't be there.
Yeah.
Right. And that help me with the word. I'm missing it. What's before a butterfly that goes into that creates.
Oh, the caterpillar.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
The caterpillar. I was about to say a moth. Yeah. So that that the caterpillar doesn't exist either. In fact, it has to completely liquefy into this soup that can't be recognized very well as either one of those things.
Physiologically breaking down.
Physiologically has to break down to nothing. Yeah. If there is a bit of that caterpillar that exists, it will diminish the existence of that butterfly. And like just knowing, like, and you know what sucks? Trying to dress up like a butterfly when you're actually freaking soup. Like when you're in the midst of that low point and you're like, man, I just want to look like, and you're just like trying to, you know, outwardly look like, oh, I got it all together. And like you're washing Ziploc bags at home to reuse them. It's just like, you're in that pit. Yeah. But you know what's the worst is repeating the same year over and over again. Like I'm not 10. I was talking to a friend about this. He said, what do you think the biggest difference is between you and people who are more successful than you, who have had essentially the same resources? I said, wasted time. I said, I can look at 3 of the last 10 years and see the lessons that if I knew them, that there would be 3 years of it. I wasn't experiencing anything. I was just repeating. I was repeating, or I was at least rhyming what I was doing so close that I wasn't really making that progress. And I think if people can get into that mindset of like, be willing to be where you are so you don't always have to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. As Jimmy said so well, like push for a season so you can pull for a lifetime.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to look about why do the hard and the inconvenient and the scary and the challenging, you know, it's because of that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. Always good to talk with you. Wanted to do it in front of cameras and
yeah, buddy.
Not over next time Corona lights rather than coffee mugs. So it almost tastes like beer.
Or some wine.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
wine.
Vino Mundial, our first podcast sponsor. We're so excited about what's just happened. You've heard it break here, folks.
Breaking news.
So, but just can't say enough about the friendship, the partnership, and your impact on my life. It's from everything from sales. When we did the first ride along, you're like, man, if that guy can do sales, I'm going to be so fine here. To being able to cast a fly line and have it go where I tell it to go. Your relationship and partnership has meant a lot to me. So thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining our conversations. We're developing this platform for simple, profound tools and techniques that can help you get the best out of your life and, more importantly, unlock potential. You can find me across all social platforms at The Brian Delaney, and online, come visit us at thebriandelaney.com.